So FDA recall definition. So quick review. Difference. What type of drugs do each handle? DEA, between the DEA and the FDA. DEA handles what type of medications?
Prescription. Or
what type of prescription? DEA. What does DEA stand for?
drug enforcement.
Drug Enforcement Agency. So what type of medicines are they kind of in control of? The scheduled ones.
Okay.
So narcotics, anything that's scheduled that has a potential for abuse. Okay, versus the FDA, which is pretty much all other prescription medicines. Okay, and they're in charge of the testing, research, all of that kind of stuff. Okay, so it says recalls are actions taken by a firm to remove a product from the market. They may be conducted on their own initiative or by FDA request, or if the FDA tells them that they have to. Okay. So sometimes, and you'll hear that, y'all probably heard those terms before. This drug has been recalled, or sometimes you'll see commercials where there's like a lawyer has come on there and said, hey, if you took this drug, it was recalled, blah blah, it had these effects. Says the urgency and severity of an FDA recall is what determines the class of the recall. Very similar to the DEA schedules, the FDA recall class schedule uses 1 as the most dangerous. However, unlike their schedule, the FDA class schedule goes to 3. So 1 is the most severe. So it says class 1 will be used in a case where there's probability that the use of or exposure to a violative product will cause serious adverse health consequences or death. So something serious is going to happen if they take it, or has been known to cause that. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody who took it or takes it is going to get that, but there's a big risk of it. Okay, class 2. I'm sorry for the craziness of how these printed out.
I was just wondering what it was.
I know. I don't know why, but there was like no. There's no like a print button. Before there's been like a print button, and it puts it into a good format. And this time, so class 2, this product may cause temporary health problems, and the probability of a serious adverse health consequence is remote. So may not cause serious problems, but can cause temporary health problems. Class 3, it says may be used in a situation in which this product is not likely to cause adverse health consequences, but has violated some other FDA regulation. Okay. So it may not cause harm, but there's something else. There could be any number of things that they violated. Look at FDA market withdrawal. So it's appropriate when a product has a minor violation that would not be subject to legal action. The manufacturer must remove the product from distribution markets or correct the violation. An example says the FDA official website says a product removed from the market due to tampering without evidence of manufacturing or distribution problems. So that's kind of like a minor, like a more minor than an actual recall. And then medical device safety alert, it says used for medical apparatus equipment. This is when medical device may present an unreasonable risk of substantial harm. These can also be called recalls. I guess for a device, like if you're thinking of like a pacemaker or something like that. Okay, FDA new drug application process. And a lot of this isn't stuff that you're obviously going to use all the time, but you do need to know about recalls. If medication's been recalled, what are you supposed to do with it? What is your pharmacy supposed to do with it, and so forth. But this is how drugs come onto the market. It says this process is lengthy, involves many details, but this is kind of the basic framework. So you just need to know it to prepare for your exam. And it is. We're talking years. It's before a drug will get developed, it's years before it actually reaches the market. So it's kind of crazy. So new drug initial development, preclinical, they may do some animal testing. That's investigational new drug review. So they look at all the trial results. They try to figure out if it's safe to even try on humans. And then they need authorization to ship it across state lines. So phase 1, it says, involves a small number of healthy volunteers. So healthy people are going to take it. I would not want to be, surely, I guess they pay them. I don't know the answer to that, but surely I would want to get paid if I was going to risk myself to some medicine I didn't know. Safely tolerated, that's how they figure out what dosages people can tolerate. Okay. They figure out what the major side effects are, emphasis on safety and maximum tolerated doses. So they're not going to like give somebody a huge dose and then say, oh, well, that was too much. They would like, gradually increase it. I would hope anyway. Phase 2 involves a lot more volunteers. Emphasis is on the drug's effect against what it's designed to treat. Okay, so in phase 1, they just want to know how much they can give, what's a reasonable amount. And in here, they want to see what's going to happen for what its purpose is. And they want to see if it's going to work. Effects are compared with similar patients receiving different treatments. So they'll look at, if we're giving them this new medicine, this is the old medicine that they were taking for this thing, like what are the effects between the two? Is it really working better than the other? And then phase 3 is more volunteers. They're going to look at their overall effect again. Effects compare with patients that are unknowingly taking placebos. So this is why, when people are they're like on a medication that's, being researched, then there's, the whole lot of fine print that goes with that. And that's, some of them, that's what these medications do. So studying different populations with different dosages, testing on the drug in combination with other drugs, see if there's anything that it should be contraindicated with. And then there's final phase for presenting it to the FDA for approval. This is the final phase. And then phase 4, they're going to keep watching it, even like when people start taking it for treatment. Healthcare professionals are reporting adverse findings, and then it's pretty much, it just is ongoing. If there's any major side effects, they should report it. Look, the time the process takes, this process can usually take 12 to 15 years. The time elapsed from a drug's discovery in a lab until it becomes available to the market to the general public can be even longer. Keep in mind that a patent only lasts 20 years from the time the application for the patent was filed. After the patent runs out, competitors may seek approval to produce generic drug equivalents. Okay, so that's why, how sometimes some medications you can only get in the brand name, and that's because it's still under that patent. It won't, until that patent is up, they can't start producing a generic version of it. That makes sense? Yeah. So it may be, that drug may be out for 8 or 10 years before a generic can actually be made for it. It says also it's estimated that less than half of new drugs approved for clinical trials ever make it to phase 3, and less than 20% make it to the market with FDA approval. It's like, what? There could be some treatments that are out there that they have been discovered, but maybe they just weren't, they determined that they weren't safe enough or whatever. Sometimes they may be funding. Think about all the money it takes to be able to fund something like that and do the research and everything else. So, okay. Pharmacy laws and federal acts. We're not going to go over all these because you'll read about them whenever you do your pharmacy technician, and there's several of them that are in the thing. So, I'm not going to go over not going to go over them all together. A few that you definitely want to look at. Narcotic tax, oh wait, not that one. Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, that's kind of like, look, it said provided better clarification about misbranding definitions, better clarification about adulteration definitions. So just making sure that things are what they say that they are. Another one that you'll see, and you could see all of them, but I'm just pointing out the ones I know I've seen on there before. The Drug Abuse Prevention, the Control Act of 1970 required the use of DEA numbers, comprehensive record keeping. Okay, so that one's important. And the Poison Prevention Packaging, that's another one that I've seen on there before. Says designed to reduce the risk of children ingesting dangerous substances. So this required locking caps on most prescriptions. Okay, so pharmacies have to put a childproof cap on prescriptions, but people can ask to not have it.
Oh, because they're not really doing it.
Right, because they may have poor dexterity, like hand dexterity. Maybe they have arthritis and they can't. Sometimes I can't even get them open. They're like really, push on them, and you can't even get them open. So you can request to not have them in a childproof case, but typically you have to put them in one. And then the other one, like I said, the one on here that it's not on here, but the OBRA, I know you'll see that, the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation. That's the one where they have to counsel Medicaid patients. So just know that one because I know I've seen that on there before. And then look at this one, Combat Methamphetamine Epidemic Act 2005. So this one's pretty recent. Enacted to regulate the over-the-counter sale of pseudoephedrine. Everybody heard of Sudafed? You know Sudafed? The cold medicine, Sudafed?
Yeah.
Pseudoephedrine is just a generic name for that portion of that medicine. So it's identity and address of each purchaser to be kept for 2 years. Daily sales of regulated products are not to exceed 3.6 grams, and then 30-day purchase limit. So that's why they started keeping Sudafed behind the counter. It's still an over-the-counter medicine, but you have to ask for it. I think if you're just getting Sudafed. Now, I think there's some medicines that might have a little bit of Sudafed in with them that you can still find. But I'm not exactly sure. Maybe some pharmacies do that just to monitor it. I don't know. But I know some places you have to ask for it. And that's because it can be abused. I mean, if people take it in the right amounts. You've probably heard of people taking cough syrup or something before to, taking a whole bunch of it. Problem is, those have there's a lot of other stuff in that besides just the Sudafed. And Sudafed can make your blood pressure go way up. So anytime people have hypertension, Sudafed is not something that you want them to be taking a lot of. Now, if they take it every now and then, whatever. But Sudafed is not something that's good for people who have hypertension because it makes it go up. So you think about it, if they take a whole bunch of it, get high off of it, their blood pressure,
People blow my mind.
Some of the things. I told y'all about the meth the other day, all the crazy stuff that goes into that. But, addictions, they make you do crazy things. I mean, they do. They make people do crazy things that we would never do if they weren't addicted to that substance, whatever it is, or thing, or whatever that they're addicted to. Okay, the NDC, the National Drug Code, system used to identify legend drugs. Remember, legend drugs are your prescription drugs. Part of the Drug Listing Act of 1972 requires manufacturers of drug products to assign a unique number to each product based on the drug type, strength, packaging size, and where it was manufactured. Okay, so you just need to know what each segment of the number identifies. Okay, so look, I don't know what stupid advertisements are. Okay, so the first segment of the NDC number, okay, it says it identifies the drug's manufacturer. So those first 4 numbers tell you who made the drug. They're going to have a certain number assigned to them. Okay, now the second segment says identifies the product. So it tells you the formulation and the strength of the product. So that's what it's going to have to do with. And then the third segment identifies the packaging. So depending on how it's packaged is going to change up that number. Okay. It says, when studying for the PTCB, you should learn what a segment identifies, what aspect of the product. So that's the main thing. You should know first, second, and third section. So first section is the manufacturer, and I've seen these questions on here before. The first segment is manufacturer, second segment is the product formulation, last one is how it's packaged. Okay, let's look at pregnancy categories, the next one. There's not a whole lot of, I don't remember there being a whole lot of information in the teaching part of this online, but I have seen some of these questions on quizzes and tests and stuff. Okay, so the FDA has established 5 categories to indicate the potential of a drug to cause birth defects if used during pregnancy. So they're determined by the reliability of documentation and the risk to benefit the ratio. So what that means is these are determined by how much has been documented about it, and then, because there's, that's not something they're going to risk. They're not going to be like, oh, let's do trials on all these pregnant women. That doesn't happen. So it's just a matter of incident. Like, if something comes up, then they documented it, then it goes from there. Says they do not take into account any risk from pharmaceutical agents or their metabolites in breast milk. So it's not the same as a nursing mother. Now, there are some medications that will say not for a nursing mother or whatever, but these are not specific to that. Okay, these are specifically for pregnancy. So category A, adequate and well-controlled studies have failed to demonstrate a risk to the fetus. So that means these are perfectly fine. Okay, it's been proven there's nothing wrong with them taking these. Now, there's not very many on this list, but not all drugs are even listed at all, if that makes sense. Not all drugs have a category if they haven't had adequate research on them. For the most, there's not a lot that are like that, but there's not very many in category A. Tylenol, levothyroxine, that's Synthroid, that's like for hypothyroidism. Folic acid, which is a vitamin you take anyway when you're pregnant. Okay. Category B, animal reproduction studies have failed to demonstrate. So they haven't done adequate studies on humans, but they have done them on animals, and they show that there's no risk. Okay, but that doesn't mean that there's no risk to humans. So that's why these are B, because they haven't done adequate studies on humans. So some of these are like your heartburn medicine. Amoxicillin is a basic, amoxicillin is a pretty basic antibiotic. So category C, animal reproduction studies have shown an adverse effect on the fetus, and there's no adequate and well-controlled studies in humans, but potential benefits may warrant use of the drug in pregnant women despite potential risk. So there is, and animals have shown that there are some effects on an animal fetus, but there haven't been any studies in humans, but they're saying the benefits may outweigh the risk. Kind of depends on the situation. So that's a C. Now, most medications, most medications, I'm not going to say most. There's a lot of medications in category B that are okay for pregnant women to take, but they haven't done studies, so they're not sure. And there's a lot in a C too. But category D says there is a positive evidence of human fetal risk based on adverse reaction data from investigational or marketing experience, but potential benefits may still warrant the use if for the rest. So it's just going to go by case. Does it really warrant the risk for that? And there's some things that there's just some things that, category D, you don't want to give a pregnant woman. You can avoid it at all. Okay, category X, these show fetal abnormalities, and there's positive evidence of human fetal risk. So definitely can cause major abnormalities. Simvastatin is a cholesterol medicine. Warfarin is a blood thinner. That's Coumadin. Methotrexate is a type of kind of a chemo drug. So, anyways, category N means that FDA has not classified the drug. Now, that could mean sometimes there's some, like Tylenol is in category N, but Tylenol is usually the only thing you can take. So there's a lot of medications you find in there too that haven't been categorized at all. So aspirin is just because of the risk of bleeding. And some things change depending on the time of the pregnancy. Like ibuprofen is okay to take until you get to the end of the pregnancy. So that's just because of the risk of bleeding. What's next on yours?
We have the federal law that affects pharmacy. It's for the computer.
Yeah, ours is different.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, let's go to, and that pregnancy one, y'all might want to put that page like under your notes, because sometimes I'll usually, if it's pregnancy category D or X, I'll usually list that on your weekly medicine list. If it's not, if it's C or better, I don't worry with it. I don't list it at all on there. But if it's a D or an X, I do on your weekly medication list, I mean. So just so you know, that's why some of them have it and some of them don't. The other thing, and you might write this on that pregnancy paper, is the word teratogen, Teratogen, teratogen. And that means it's something that causes abnormalities in fetuses and babies. Okay, let's look at this chapter 3 from the pharmacy technician that says law terms, legal terms to know, and all that stuff. And skip,
This big.
yep, that's it. And skip on over to page 4. At the very top left, it says violations of pharmacy laws. I don't know what slide number this is. Okay, so we're just going to look at the pharmacy ones. Again, I'm going to let you guys, the acts are in, you'll do that in your reading, all of the laws that go with it. And then we've got a couple other things on here. Violations of pharmacy law. It says fraud is dishonest and deceitful practices. Libel, defamatory writing. Slander, defamatory speech. So libel and slander kind of go together. And I think we talked about those maybe in principles, but libel just means you're defaming somebody in writing, like I'm trying to think of an example. Like, let's say you work somewhere and then you wrote a column or an article in the newspaper about how horrible that workplace is. Okay, that could be libel. Versus slander, which is saying something. Same idea, but it's just doing that via speech. Okay, negligence, failure to use reasonable care. And then abuse, of course, improper use of equipment, substance, or service. So those are all things that, as far as pharmacy goes, those are violations that can happen. Pharmacy law and regulation at the state level says practice is primarily a function of the state and not the federal government. But again, whichever one's more strict is what we're going to go by. State pharmacy law requires minimal qualifications for a class of individuals who are involved with pharmacy practice. In most states, certificates of registration to practice are granted for 1 to 2 years. And that's the case. We already have recertification. So every 2 years, you have to recertify. That just means you get your continuing education. It's not like you have to retest. You have to keep getting continuing education. Pharmacy, well, I didn't say you had to retest it. Okay.
I don't think
It's like, well, maybe I said that wrong, but says at the federal level, it's regulated by a series of rules, regulations, and laws. So all the laws that are listed in here. The first important law to regulate the development, compounding, distribution, storage, and dispensing of drugs was passed in 1906. So imagine, I think about, like we talked about the history of medicine last year in principles, and you think about, when people did use like herbs and stuff, and how do you figure out how much somebody's getting? I think about, I don't know, like the opium poppy, so they would give them opiates for pain. But how do you know how much is too much? Like, how many people quit breathing because they gave them so much, and it depressed their respiratory system? I don't know. Crazy to think about. Just eat these leaves and hope it works, and have no idea how much you're getting. Okay, skip on over to page 6. Let's look at registration, the bottom left. I'm just skipping through here because we already talked about the schedule stuff. Okay, registration, it says individuals who manufacture, dispense, or distribute any controlled substance are obligated to register with the DEA unless they are exempt for some reason. Okay, so again, any controlled substances that goes with the DEA. Registrations vary in length from 1 to 3 years. So if they let it run out, they're not able to give that anymore. The DEA can suspend or revoke a registration if they have falsified their application or has been convicted of a felony under federal or state law. So if once they've done that, they're going to lose their right to dispense those medicines. Okay, ordering controlled substances. I know we've talked about this already. So the 222 is the form that they have to use to get Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 drugs. Anyone attempting to order controlled substances has to have a DEA license. And then, of course, that form is not, you don't have to do that with Schedule 3 through 5. You can order it, but you do have to order it directly from the manufacturer or wholesaler. Okay, theft of controlled substances. It says if a controlled substance is stolen or lost from a pharmacy, the nearest DEA office must be notified, and there's a form, that 106 is what they have to fill out. I know those sound crazy. You think, okay, these numbers are crazy, but yeah, that's just the way it is. They've got all these forms. There's so much paperwork involved, and that's with every job, and especially every job in healthcare. Paperwork all the time. Complete report must be made, and the pharmacy should keep the original copy and send 2 copies to the DEA, and in most states, 1 copy also to the Board of Pharmacy. Sometimes another copy is required to be sent to the local police. Lots of paperwork again. Okay, dealing with outdated or damaged controlled substances, and this is something that you'll see in the quizzes. I know I've seen questions on this before. When controlled substances become out of date, then they have to use this DEA Form 41. Pharmacist writes a cover letter explaining the situation, requesting DEA permission to destroy the substances, and then 2 witnesses have to observe the destruction. Okay. So it's a big to-do. So I guess that's why one job this is going to sound really silly, but one job that's really important as far as pharmacy techs go is inventory and keeping up with how old medications are. So you always move, the oldest medications to the front and then new ones at the back so that people can, so you make sure that you're using the medications that you have on hand. Because you don't want to have to go through this big rigmarole to get rid of them. Returning controlled substances. When controlled substances from Schedule 2 are returned, then you have to use the 222 form again. These substances may only be returned from one DEA registrant to another. Okay, so you can't send it to somebody who's not licensed with the DEA, is what they're saying. Any facility that does not have a DEA number cannot return controlled substances. Okay, record keeping. It says any pharmacy that handles controlled substances must keep complete and accurate records of all the drugs received and dispensed and keep those for 2 to 5 years. Okay, Schedule 2 drug records must be kept separately from all other records. And I've seen that question on the quizzes before. Schedule 2 drugs have to be kept separate from the other scheduled medicines. Okay, all of the records do. You just want to be able to easily access them. Okay, inventory. Says the CSA requires each registrant to make a complete and accurate record of all stocks of controlled substances on hand every 2 years. At CSA's Controlled Substances Act. So look, make a complete and accurate record of all stocks of controlled substances on hand. So every 2 years they have to do like an inventory. What all do we have on hand? And look at it. When the inventory of Schedule 2 controlled substances is done, an exact count or measure must be made. Prescription, and this may, there may be more information on this whenever you get to watching your videos. It may go a little bit more detailed than this. Prescription says a prescription for a controlled substance must be issued. We looked at this already. You can't, no refills on Schedule 2. They have to get them every month or however often. Maybe their refill may be for 3 months or something, but they can't have refills on there. I think my only issue with that and them changing that is I feel like that's going to make doctors prescribe more medication at one time. So if they can't get refills, because they're not going to want to have to come back to the doctor every 28 days to get a refill. So I feel like instead of making a month's worth of prescription of Norco or Lortab or whatever their pain medicine is, I feel like doctors are going to be more likely to give them like 2 to 3 months of pain medicine in one prescription.
Yeah.
That makes sense? Which is not really a good thing because that's a lot of pain medicine to have at one time. If they can do that, I need to look that up. I don't even know if they can prescribe that, but I feel like they can because I feel like I've seen big bottles of pain medicine before, so I don't know. But you can't blame them. They don't. I mean, think of all the patients that physicians have, and if they have to come in every single month to get new pain medicine, I mean, that's some of the most prescribed medicine that there is, Anyway, so page 9, we go on over. There's lots of drug acts in here, but that Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act is in here. So trying to see. I cannot remember. I'm trying to think of some other ones that I've seen on there. Y'all remember what OSHA is, right? Occupational Safety and Health Administration. So that's for the good of the work of the worker, bloodborne pathogens and so forth. HIPAA, we've talked about that before. Everybody remember the difference in Medicaid and Medicare? Medicaid is related, if you qualify for Medicaid, that's related to finances. And it's related to, you have to make below a certain amount of money to qualify for Medicaid. Medicare is for the elderly. Okay, so 65 and older who have worked and paid in to Medicare. Okay, that's how they qualify for that. Typically, they have to work at least 10 years, pay into Medicare for at least 10 years to get that benefit. Okay, but spouses can also benefit, even if they didn't work. They can still benefit from their spouse's Medicare. So, anyway. Typically, somebody's Medicare number is their Social Security number, plus a letter behind it, A or B, or sometimes it's D. Now, if the spouse is getting it off of their, like if a wife is getting Medicare from her husband having worked, then they usually have like their Medicare number would usually be their husband's plus like a D or something like that, depending on what it is. But anyway. Let's see. We talked about most of this stuff. Look at federal regulatory agencies at the top of page 11. It says the FDA oversees all domestic and imported food, bottled water, wine beverages with less than 7% alcohol, cosmetics. I'm on page 11, I'm sorry, the top. Medicines, medical devices, radiation emitting products, and then seed and drugs used for farm animals. So FDA is a huge organization. I mean, for that to be a federal organization and to be in charge of all of that, I mean, it's huge. So it's not just medications. I feel like that should be split up anyway.
Yeah.
So that's it. And we talked about DEA. Look on the very last page. Let's look at drug standards. These drug standards are the set of requirements for the formulation of drugs, substances, ingredients, dosage forms. Stocked in the pharmacy must be listed drugs. So anything that's stocked in the pharmacy has to be like on the USP, the United States Pharmacopoeia. That's like the list of medications that can be prescribed, or the national formulary. So drug formulary stocked by the pharmacy must be maintained. So each pharmacy has to have a list of medications, like a formulary that says what drugs they keep there. And then we talked about ethics before. That's not really anything that's new for us. Okay, we'll stop there for now, and then We'll do